Harriet! How are
Hello, so intense.
you? Welcome to Monday Night Live.
Thank you. Thank you. You've got tea or coffee? No wine?
There may be one inside.
There could be
It,
wine as well.
it shall remain a mystery for now.
Okay, mystery. We can all guess.
Okay, before I introduce Harriet, ladies and gentlemen, we want to make this as interactive as possible. Harriet's got a lot of experience in sales, and it's an area which, whether or not business owners realize it, I think most of them do. It will make or break a business if you don't know how to sell. Your business is toast. The reality of it is most businesses that I come across in B2B don't have a sales process. They don't necessarily, well, not always, don't always see the problem with that. So it's something I want to shine a light on today, and that's why I've asked Harriet to join us, or invited Harriet to join us. She's kindly agreed. So drop in the comments, let us know where you're tuning in from for a couple of reasons. I want to make it as engaging as possible. And so if you drop in the comments, it'll make others feel comfortable to do the same thing, and we can answer the questions that may come up as we go through the discussion. Amber, always very quick to be a part of the conversation. Welcome. I know we've got people coming from we've got people tuning in LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube, but the YouTubers, they're not often sitting on the couch, so we don't always get comments from those guys. But so Harriet, why don't you give us a 2-minute overview of what you do, and then we'll talk a little bit about your background and how you got into that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a sales coach and consultant. I work with service-based businesses to help improve their sales. So whether that be from a process perspective, from a revenue or outcome-driven perspective, I work with businesses all around the world, namely in the UK, America, and Australia, to focus on improving their sales revenue through a number of different streams. And that's where really the consulting piece comes in. And then the coaching element is that one-on-one support for, I'm going to say that small to medium business, because usually the medium to enterprise is where the consulting comes through. So that's what I do currently, but my background is ICT, cybersecurity sales, which is what I've done for the last 15 years. And prior to that, I was an events organizer, which was like the dream. That was all I ever wanted to do, was be an events organizer. And then got into IT, got into sales, and here I am now.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm curious if we go back a little bit further to your childhood and your high school. Was there any signs that you may go down this path when you were young? What kind of kid were you? Were you well behaved in school?
I was very well behaved in school. Yes, I was very, very studious. But in saying that, I didn't go to university. So I was a doer. I just wanted to get stuff done. I wanted to see results. And I didn't really know what those results meant to me at the time. I just knew I wanted to get stuff done. I loved a chat, loved to find out about people and make connections and meet people. And I was always known as I was the chatty kid in school. And then when it came to college time, do I go to university? Do I not? And I was like, I don't want to write about stuff. I want to go out there and experience it and learn it and actually do it. And that was what I did. So, yes, that was me outside of school and university.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So people person. When was it that you realized you had a bit of a knack for sales?
It was actually a boss of mine that identified it really early on, and a couple of jobs that I did, they were like, you should be in sales, this is what you should be doing. I was like, I don't want to be in sales. I don't want to be known as a salesperson. I don't want to cold call. I don't want to do all of that. And it was then when I went into a new role actually in IT that it was I was flung into that role. And it was all along when I was still doing sales, I never said I did sales. I was partner experience team and looking after the inbound generation, and it would never, and then eventually it became sales management. But only, I think, when that confidence came for me around that, actually I was really comfortable with being a salesperson.
Yeah. Okay. So there is a stigma around sales, and it's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Yes.
So I completely understand.
Still here.
Yeah. But there's all these different types of sales methodologies that are out there. Which one Did you do some sales training and decide what sort of methodology works for you, or have you created your own style?
I created my own from learning. So there's lots, like I've done the spin sales, there's like different types of funnel, there's something around a cat. The list could go on. I'm sure lots of people have done different levels of training. But actually, when I first went into it, it was more like, let me just test the waters and see what works. And the biggest transformation for me was actually linking problems to solutions. And that's the methodology, and that's where I've created the sales methodology that I teach today, is around what I've actually tried and tested over the last, I'm going to say 15 years, because that's when I've been in a real sales role that I've been happy with sales.
Yeah, fascinating. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've got a few questions. I just want to say hello to some of the people tuning in. So we've got Mark, Joanne, Kirsty Parks is in Sydney, bless her. Lacey Savills is in Perth. Thanks for tuning in, Lacey. Catherine, Edinburgh, Scotland.
There's also Perth in Scotland, fun fact.
There you go. Have you? Okay, so cool. Have you got an English accent, or is that just me?
No, I do. Yeah, English. Well, English born and bred until I've been in Australia for 8 years.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was in England until I was 5. So.
You lost the accent though.
Not many pick the accent, no.
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 Are salespeople born or made, do you think?
I think there's a mix. I think there's people that are born to sell, that have just got that in them. They come into that role and that's what they want to do. But there's certainly, you can actually you could be trained to sell, if you're trained in the right way. And that's again, you've got so many people that come into business that want to run a business, that have these incredible business ideas, but when it comes to actually executing and talking about how they can sell that product, that's the difference, and that's where the skills come in, and we can then be trained at that.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense. And so let's maybe just start with the mistakes that you see people making. What are the biggest mistakes that you see salespeople making? Let's go with B2B to start with. We'll focus on B2B. I think most of the people tuning in are B2B. Yeah.
Okay. Most mistakes. So there's a couple of different areas that I tend to spot them. But first off, if you're in sales, so we won't talk about strategy, we'll just talk about actually selling, is the fact that that people don't listen. So we get this awesome lead and they're on the phone, we're having this conversation, or we're in a meeting, and in our heads we've got this particular product we want to sell or a particular service we want to sell, and we're not listening for the other bits that they might want to talk about. We're actually just listening for the stuff that we want to talk about. And so that's a really common mistake, because we go into a meeting, I want to sell this product or this service, the customer isn't giving us what we want to hear, so we just keep pitching. And a couple of other ones around that is like asking a really awesome open question to gather that really good information that's going to help us along that sales process, and then turning it into a closed question because we freak out about silence or about that pause. So that's another one I hear. So we go through open questions where we want to gather information and qualify the lead or the opportunity. And then we ask this open question, like a who, what, where, when, how question. And we turn it into a closed question of, do you do this?
I see. Yeah.
Automatically, as a human, we're programmed just to say yes. So if you ask me an open question, I give you all this information. If you turn that into a closed question or give me a scenario-based question, I'm always going to go with your scenario-based question, even if it's not quite in line with what I was about to say to you in an open question.
Yeah. Okay. So just the listeners, everyone's can grasp what we're talking about here. I'm trying to think of an example. It might be something like you might say why is it that you would like to buy a house? Is it because of this or this? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. So why are you here looking at this house today? Let them speak. Is it because you want a house in this suburb, or you need 3 bedrooms? Then we're always going to say one of them. We're just programmed as humans. That's what we're there to do.
Yeah. And with this negative stigma of sales, I guess I feel like a prospect will walk into a sales situation and they're kind of trying to feel out whether you're trying to sell them something was probably the way they would describe it. But
Yeah.
whether you're a threat and you're trying to manipulate them into doing something, that they might not want to do, or you're there to help them. How do you suggest that people take that pressure off at the start of the conversation?
It comes into that qualification component again, and I'm sure people that already follow me are just like, qualification is all she talks about, but it's the biggest part where we get to understand what they want, and we're able to recap and take them on a journey along that sales process that makes them feel heard and makes them feel supported. So in the initial conversation where we're understanding what it is that they need, I don't recommend to go in with a pitch. I recommend to ask questions first. So if I was going out to meet a new prospective to work, even just to work with me, in this basis, I would want to find out more about them, because as soon as people start to talk about themselves, they feel happier and more confident because they know that subject. That's easy. So let me find out a bit more about you. Let me find out something that I can really latch onto and really find that common ground with somebody. So we start to build relationships, and then we understand what it is that they actually want as a business or for that business need. And then we recap on that. So if I ask questions to uncover their requirements, as soon as I start to be able to verbalize that back to them in my own words that you understand, and then I share a story with them around how somebody similar has come up with a similar problem or a similar industry or a similar outcome they're trying to get, you're like, oh, she does understand, because I've been able to ask some questions, identify the need or identify the problem or identify the outcome, share how I can help, and then share a story. They're like, oh, okay, she's not trying to sell me something. She knows what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to get to, and she's been able to articulate it back. They feel more confident straight away.
Yeah. And with the qualification, are you looking for? How do I word this? So if somebody, will you sell to everybody, or are you trying to look for who's not the buyer as well when you ask those questions?
Yeah. So we're always going to work out, like, is this right for me, but is it also right for you? So in those conversations, someone's talking about certain components that I don't offer, or I don't want to offer, or they're not really saying the right things to me, then that would then be a way that I qualify people in or out of working with me, just as much as a customer would want to work out, am I right for them? Because I might ask them some questions, they're like, she's full on, like, I'm not ready for this isn't what I wanted, or she hasn't understood what I actually need, and therefore she's not right for me.
Okay. So what are some of the main qualifying questions that businesses need, or salespeople need to ask B2B buyers? Like what are a few examples?
So a lot of the questions that are really easy to ask, that a lot of businesses I see ask are like, what are you looking for? What are you trying to achieve? Like, a lot of that comes in, but as soon as we find out a bit about what they're looking for, we tend to dive in, like, and whether it's technical. And when I say technical, I don't mean as in IT technical, as in technical about your industry. We start to get really into the nitty gritty. Whereas actually, if we take a step out of there and we want to understand, what does the journey look like? So if this meets the requirements, who's part of the decision-making process? If this meets the requirements, what's the time frame? If we don't meet the time frame, what's the risk to your business or to this decision being made? Is there a budget set aside for this? So those questions that I like to call, like, they generally feel a bit more challenging. Like, and when I give that to salespeople, they're usually the ones that kind of shy away from, because they're the questions where somebody might say something we don't want to hear. But I would rather hear that at call 1 than at meeting 5, when I forecast it and the salesperson goes, Mr. Sales Manager, like, we've nailed this, I'm going to get this sale in. And then someone comes down and goes, well, John didn't sign it off. We didn't know John needed to sign it off. So so in that qualification is just about asking those hard questions. And the stuff that we're not finding out is generally where the roadblock comes later on down the line, when we want to quote something.
Okay. So, and if I'm putting on a spot too much, just let me know. But like let's say a guy, because I come across this a lot. So like, if somebody says something like, you ask them when they need to do something by, and they're like, I'm not in a rush. And then you say, what's your budget? And they say, Oh, I don't really have one.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? I mean, do you go do you go forward or not with a proposal?
So are you saying that if they've asked that question, if they've said that right at the beginning?
Well, they may have told you what they want, and they may have told you what the problem is, and then you've asked them when they need to do it by and what their budget is, and they don't have a real, like, a very definitive answer to those two questions. Like, is
Yeah.
that a sign that they're not serious?
Um, no, because a lot of people don't have a budget. So some people in their head either don't want to give you a budget, because if they give you the budget, you're just going to stretch to that budget. So if, say, in your head you've got a $20,000 budget, then and you don't want to say that to whoever's asking you that question, then the $20,000 is in your head. And you're like, I don't have a budget. I don't know what that would be. Then we want to ask some more questions around that. So what I mean by asking questions around that is like, okay, cool. So you don't have a budget in mind. Do you have, like, who's going to approve this, and whose budget will it come out of? So again, depending on the size of the company, will depend on that. And then when we know who it's actually being, who's going to be responsible for that budget, or who's going to allocate the spend for that project, is around the decision making and who's going to come into that.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Like, I get that. Like,
Yeah.
I think I get that a lot, and they're like, there's no budget. And they even say, we've got a big budget, and I'm like, okay,
You name it. Yeah,
we'll go for it.
You've also got, like, so there's another way around that where this has worked for me quite a lot in the bigger, like, and in software sales. I mean, some numbers are huge, but in the enterprise selling, is that I will actually call up and test the water with a number. And what I mean by that is that I've rung someone and said, look, we're looking like $1 million for this. Like, are you going to fall off your chair when I say $1 million, or are we still on this? And then then I've had it where they've gone, oh, I don't know whether that's going to wash. I'm like, cool. Well, look, do you want me to send a proposal or not send a proposal? And they're like, no, send it. Let's have a look. Then when it actually sends under $1 million, I've managed their expectations, and now we know where we're going to stand, because sometimes, again, we want to, the higher the value sometimes can mean that actually it's more exclusive. We're actually going to give, there's going to be more value if they spend this level of money. So you've got different elements. If they're not going to give you a budget, then maybe test the water with something when they say, okay, I haven't got a budget allocated, but how much should I expect to pay? Yeah. That you can then say, well, like, I do anything from 5,000 to 100,000. So if we maybe work in the realm of that, how does that feel for you? And then you can start to then try and move it back. A lot of businesses won't give you a budget, and that's totally okay. But if we don't ask the question, we're not going to give any guidelines around that.
Yeah. I don't know where I picked this up from some sales training where they called it ballparking, where you're like, okay, I'm going to come back with solutions. They're going to be somewhere between $2,000 a month and $10,000 a month. Are you closer to the 2 or the 10? And they may not answer you, but they kind of, like, you can tell.
You can, and you can usually tell as well from that qualification, like, asking questions like, have you bought anything like this before? Have you ever had to budget something like this before? What has been, what is, how has that worked in the business? Like, do you set things aside, or what will the outcome of this project bring for the business? So again, if we know that by implementing whatever it is that we're selling, that if that's $1 million outcome for the customer, then our sales, and we know then what our return on investment should be around that mark. Again, it works the same if you've got $1,000 product. So I've mentioned a few big numbers here, but I want to bring it back down again. Is that if they're saying, look, we're hoping to increase by this, we're hoping this to bring this, if we can attribute that to a dollar value, then we know then, okay, I'm going to pitch you something that's $5,000, but I know in return it's going to bring you potentially up to $10,000 worth of business. There's a return on investment there that somebody could then manage.
Yeah. Okay. And this is another one that I see a lot of clients get. I actually see them get this in their LinkedIn inbox, right? But, like, it would happen on the telephone as well. But where someone would get in touch and they go, oh yeah, we want to get X. We want a ERP system. We want to buy a data security system, or we want to buy we want to finance this, and they go, how much is it? And what I see a lot of my clients do is, and like I've tried to tell them, but I'm not a coach. Like, is they just like dive in and they answer the question, and they don't know anything about the prospect. Like, what would you say? Let's say it was on the telephone, and somebody straight off the bat just goes, "How much is it?" What would you say in that scenario?
I would be really facetious and say between 5,000 and 100,000, because without really understanding what you need, I can't quote it. And so I've had this with actually a client of mine in the UK, and he's selling quite a niche product in design. And I remember he used to get so many people that would come to him, and he would say, we want to do this. This is what we're looking for. Can you give us a quote? And so what we ended up doing was we actually factored into his phases. So if they wanted a quote, then we needed more information. If they weren't prepared to give more information, we actually didn't give them a quote. So we then talked through the phases, and actually by educating your customers in why you need that information makes it much more manageable and much more clearer from their part to know that actually you're not going to quote until you've got more information. Because again, everything we're quoting, if we're tailoring a solution, now if we are, let's use the example if we've got a fixed price and we know that this is $79.95 or it's $700 or it's $7,000, but it's a fixed price, we still want something from them in return to give them pricing unless it's available on your website. And that's because we want to capture our audience. We want to understand the lead so we know what our prospect wants and needs. And then we match that with a product or service. And so even if we do have fixed prices internally, the customer doesn't know that. And so if we can then understand what it is that they need, what outcome they need, then we can propose a solution or a service or a product to suit. Without that, I'm just going to give you a product and it might not be the right one for you. And so if I haven't had the opportunity to do that, that's going to reflect poorly on my business and on my product and my service, and you won't thank me for that. So that's the reason why I need to find out a little bit more, and it'll only take me a few minutes. Let me gather that information, and then I'll come back to you with a quote. How does that sound? And that gets them on board a little bit more, as opposed to just being like, it's between here and here. We can do that if they're being difficult, but then also if they're really pushing you for price, they're not going to value your service, and do we really want to work with them?
Yeah. Well, good answer. I gotta say hello to Jason Davies. He's over in Facebook. Jason Davies, how are you, mate? He's
Hi, Jason.
Look at that picture. Jason, he's trouble, that guy. Amelia, how are you? Still got some Facebook people in the house. G'day from Perth, Greg. Awesome. Where's all your sales questions, guys? You're going to be a bit shy with the sales questions.
Yeah. I know. Well, it's funny actually because I run, I do an offer out to all of anyone that follows me and ask me a question, and I'll publish it in the newsletter that I send out, which is got tips, bits on there, and it's really interesting. I get a storm through of loads, and then eventually it'll stop, and I'm like, guys, this is free. Ask questions, get the answers.
Yeah. I get a lot of them privately, and I just say, no worries, happy to answer it. Just post it with this hashtag so that other people can get value out of it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't want to they don't want to ask questions in public on social media because they don't want to show they don't know something. Well, I mean, I think, the guy that, when I do these interviews, right, I did a lot of the in person before lockdown, the guy that I interviewed that asked me more questions than anyone else I interviewed was Grant Cardone. He was the most famous, successful person I interviewed, and he asked me more questions than anyone else when I interviewed him.
But you want to gather that information through and learn from it. I'm that person that always puts my hand up to ask the questions because I learn from them. Yeah.
He goes. If you were running my business, what would you be doing differently? What am I doing wrong? That's what he asked me. I'm like,
wow, yeah, love that. So what do you find then, Nat, in your business? What do you find? Because I know, from
I see what you're doing. I see what you did there.
I see what I did there. I turned it off. We've got no questions. I'm going to ask the questions. So when you mentioned that because you have your consulting clients on LinkedIn. What do you see their biggest challenges as being, when it comes to selling?
Sales process. They just don't. Yeah. They don't. I ask them. I say, so do you have a sales process? And they go, yeah. Okay, what is it? Well, we just respond to the inquiry. We call them and we answer their questions, and then they buy. Right? Yeah. There's no sales process, but there's also no understanding that there's a need for one. And as I said, I'm not a sales coach, so I get a bit nervous at this point because if they don't convert the leads that we generate, it doesn't work.
No.
Yeah. It's been a massive issue from my business since day one. The very first client I had, I definitely over delivered. I was, just like, I'm gonna generate them more leads than they've ever seen. They were generating leads on AdWords, so I know exactly what their cost per lead was. They were expecting 20 to 30 leads in a month, and I got them 150 odd, right? And they were HR directors of these, like water companies and big companies, 150 leads. And I go to see them at the end of the month, first client, and I was like, walk in, I'm like, yeah, I'm the man, aren't I? You're going to stay with me forever. And they said, Nathaniel, we're blown away with how many leads you've generated. We need to cancel because we're going to need 6 months to follow these all up.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I didn't know anything about a minimum term contract or anything like that, but I soon learned that it wasn't about the volume of the leads. It's actually about helping them manage those leads so they actually don't cause stress or problems for the business, actually convert into, stable revenue, stable growth. And so that's been the major issue that I've come across. Yeah. And as I said, I'm not a sales coach. So when they do something wrong, or I see the messages reply and they've got this like long letter that they've replied to something, and I'm like, have you considered there may be another way to do this? Like, I find it very difficult then to tell them that they're doing it wrong when they don't see it that way. Yeah, because what they do is they say the leads are shit. Like that's what it's outside of their control, Yeah,
there's a very funny, there's a skit from a Glengarry Glen Ross movie, and it says leads are shit. It's like the leads aren't shit, you're shit. Maybe leave with that next time.
Well, I mean, it would be a lot better experience for them if they, if they believed that there was another way to do things.
Yes.
Sales is a skill, Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it definitely is. And this is what, a lot of my customers that I work with are like, I want to generate this much. I'm like, okay, cool, it's a skill. So how much practice are you going to put into this? How much time are you going to put in? And same with sales team. Like I work with big sales teams, which I love, but I know like a lot of them don't practice. They don't go home and learn. And then I remember a boss who I worked for in the UK, and he came into the sales team one day and the numbers were down. And he was like, right, what's going on? And he came in and he said, how put your hands up if you play football? And all the lads put their hands up. And he said, how many times do you train? They're like twice a week, Tuesday, Thursday. And when do you play? Saturday. Cool. So you train Tuesday and Thursday to perform well on Saturday. Okay. Did you get paid to play football? I'm like, no. He's like, okay, cool. Do you get paid here? Like, yeah. Okay. And so you perform Monday to Friday, like between 9 and 5, these are the days that you perform. Outside of that, what training do you do to come in to be the best on the phone in your meetings as you possibly can be? And they're like, oh, nothing. I mean, and I do, I'm here and that's what I'm showing up for. But so it's the training that you put in is certainly what you get out. And I've also interesting with what you mentioned about the leads is that when we've got businesses that are doing all right, so they're happy, they're kind of tracking along, we're all good. When we had a few more leads, but then we go, okay, well, what? And the questions I'm sure you're asking is what will you do when you get all of these leads? So if I can increase your leads by 10 times or by 10% or 20% or whatever that number is, how are you going to manage those extra leads? And what's the journey that lead goes on? And this is what, again, it's really hard to be in a business and know about and think about stepping out of the business and looking in to a sales team and go, what's the process? What's the journey? Who needs to touch this lead for it to be successful? And what are those process points? And it's almost just building out that checklist. But again, once we get into that position where we've got so many leads, it's really hard then to actually be successful with those leads because we've not pre-planned it. We're not ready to take on that extra business. And also we want that to increase that conversion rate, not for the conversion rate to drop because we've got higher leads. Yeah,
I think if they've been doing it a long time, you can't it's not that they're stuck in their ways. It's just that it like you said, it's worked for them, right? It kind of worked. They don't know that they don't know what they're missing out on. But so there's a couple of things. So a couple of things I want to touch on because I think it should be really valuable to people tuning in, and certainly for my clients if I send them this afterwards. So from a sales process perspective, what are the main what are the main things that a sales process should have? And then I think as well, also what would be valuable is, you know, when you have salespeople, I don't know if you've had the same experience, or maybe it's just the guys that I've hired. You know, I tend to hire people that are very similar to me. So like yeah, I know, right? Well, like in sales, like I'm good at sales. I'm looking for, anyway, yeah. So a lot of the time they got this like, it's not ego or confidence. It's just like. So I'll give you an example. This is going to be very helpful. So I'll give you an example, right? So I had 3 salespeople working for me in Melbourne, and we would fill up their calendar pretty much as soon as they started. And so the first couple of weeks, because we generate leads through LinkedIn, to fill up about 3 or 4 appointments a day. They would all come into the office for their profile review, and there was like a script of what we would say during the profile review, question at the end, and then it would move on to the proposal if they answered all the questions right. And so I'd do the meetings with them for the first 2 weeks, and then after that they would go do them on their own. So the process was like well defined. And you know, had these 3 salespeople, and the conversion rates were much lower than they should have been. And so I decided to experiment. I got my executive assistant, who was like she was a virtual assistant that ended up working full time for me. And I said, "Could you do me a favor? Could you just take these scripts and these processes, and can you do sales for a week?" She's like, "I've never done sales before, right?" Like,
how dare you?
But because she'd never done it before, something interesting happened. She followed the script, right? And her conversion rate was a lot higher than the salespeople. Yeah. Because they'd have the script there, but then they'd start walking around the office talking about all sorts of other stuff. You know?
Yeah, they're scrolling Instagram and they're doing all the other things. Because like, I got this. I don't need your script.
Yeah, like I was like flipping there, playing around, like I'm all over this, and obviously results weren't the same. So it's a couple of things. So what are the main things that a sales process needs to have, and how do you think is an effective way for you to get the sales team to adopt as a sales manager? How do you get them to embrace that as something that might be beneficial to them?
Okay. So first question about what's important in a sales process.
It's a tough question. Yeah.
It's it. I'm like, let me get this right. So the bit in this, so we'll tackle the sales process first, and then we'll talk about management. Because it's different. So with the sales process is that the key thing for me, I think, is missing is in a lot of sales processes is the follow-up. So what we do is we get a lead. Awesome. We reply to the lead either with a quote, or we qualify and then we quote, and then they do nothing. And we just wait for them to come back to us because we've sent the quote. They're going to tell me yes or no, surely. Like, that's what happens, isn't it? But actually, that's not what happens. And we don't set boundaries around like a time frame or around an expectation that we've got for when they should come back to us or how they should come back to us. And so for me, number one is follow up. And that communication, the follow-up. And follow-up can be I want follow-up everywhere. I want follow-up from a meeting. I want a follow-up from a call. I want a follow-up with a quote. I do quotes over the phone, and then then I send them through an email. So again, you're like always gauging, like, are we still online with what's going on? And if we've got a process where we've got a qualification, making sure that qualification supports us when we get to the objection handling.
Okay. So when somebody you're following up, like a lot of people will just say, "Oh, I'm just checking in. Like, do you have an answer for me?" You know, is that the sort of thing? Like, is there a better way to do it?
There is, yes, there is a better way to do it, but it's all about what you did first. So I'm just going to use the objection handling as an example. I'm going to come back to that follow-up call.
Yeah, perfect.
If we do objection handling and someone says this, this is going to work for me, or I don't think we're going to go ahead. If we have asked the right questions at qualification, we can help support those objections because we've understood what they needed. So if they're like, "Oh no, that's not going to work for us," or "I'm going to get sign off in the next 2 or 3 weeks," then actually that's not going to work. Like, we're going to already know that because our qualification stage it has to happen within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Otherwise, it's not going to support the business outcome that we require. So by knowing what the roadblock is or what the driver is behind this project allows us to support that objection handling. Just like if you're saying, the business needs to be here, and we're like, okay, cool. If you don't go ahead with this now, like, that's not going to happen. So if you do nothing, where will you be in the next 6 months or next 12 months? Depending obviously on what it is that we're selling. So that's the two pieces that through that process we really need to have. The follow-ups, now you can do follow-ups depending on what the communication level is between your customer. So qualification always needs to be over the phone or in person. We can't do that over email. It's just not work.
I'm glad you said that. Listen up. Oh, if any of my clients are listening,
it has to be over the phone.
Play that bit back. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes.
You don't want to go back, guys. You don't want to be going back and forth on LinkedIn messages or email or anything. You've got no control.
No. Yeah. Thanks so much for your inquiry. Would love to find out more. Are you available on Tuesday or Thursday next week? And I'll tee up a call. Give them options. Don't ask them when are they free. Give them options. Are you free on Tuesday or Thursday next week? I've got good availability on Friday. How does that work for you? But by giving them two options, psychology shows that we'll generally choose the second.
Yeah. So just to highlight this point, because I want to make sure this hits home. So when they message you on LinkedIn and they go, "How much is it?" You say, "Great question. Let's schedule a call and talk about it."
Yeah. Great question. Are you free on Thursday or Friday? And we'll tee up a call and I can tell you more about the products or service and I can give you that. Because if we can qualify and we've got set prices, we can simply give them. But without that, we can't do it. And we don't want that back and forth. We don't want that question back and forth because then they disappear. They ghost you real quick. And it's a lot harder once you've spoken to somebody and built a relationship.
As soon as I just want to say, as soon as you answer, because those LinkedIn messages, I see them all the time. As soon as you start answering all those questions, you're not being rude by not answering the questions. You're doing them a service because you can't give them the information that they need until you know why they're buying, what they want, and so having a call is actually the most beneficial to the client. They ask you a bunch of questions. A lot of clients come to me and they say, "Oh yeah, I heard you do LinkedIn advertising. We want to buy that." And I said, "Well, what do you want LinkedIn advertising for?" And they say, "Well, I want to get some leads." And I ask a few more questions. And it turns out like the best way to get leads is not LinkedIn advertising. It's doing X, Y, Z. So you can imagine if you did answer all those questions and then they've worked out in their own mind it's not LinkedIn advertising, then they've not got to see you as an expert.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to only deliver the best for your clients. And so if we've qualified and we know what they need, we can position a product or a service to suit them. And if we don't know what we need, then we're just pitching a product or service that they think they need, that we think that might be okay. And the outcome's always going to be bad.
Yeah, love it. Yeah. What's your thoughts on what's your thought on discounts?
On what, sorry?
Discounts.
Discounts. Ooh, discounts.
Do you do discounts?
Do I do discounts? I love that question. So for me, I would say discounts are available. Like it depends on your business model. Now, if you've got if you're solid on what you offer, I wouldn't discount. Louis Vuitton doesn't discount. Gucci doesn't discount. Porsche doesn't discount. So on and so forth. We don't have these exclusive brands that only want a handful of clients because they make so much money anyway. They don't discount. And so as soon as we get into discounting, it starts to devalue our brand and our products and our service, and people wait for discounts. So, for example, we now know that, Witchery and Country Road, which are Australian brands, they will always discount. So there's always a spend and save. There's always some sale. There's always some discount off. So why on earth are we incentivized to buy something there when there's so many discounts on? If I wait a week, I'll get a discount somewhere. So I might as well just hold off and I'm going to get it. And so that's what, unfortunately, the way that retail is going. And that's a retail example. But in our businesses, if we want a discount or give some form of discount, we only want to do that when we've got agreement from the customer that by giving them the discount, they're going to sign today. They're going to sign by 2 p.m. If you sign by 2 p.m., I'll give you 10% off. If you sign by 2 p.m., I'll give you that $50 cash back. If you sign by this date, you'll have an hour free consulting time with me. There are compelling business reasons to move forward because you've given me something in return. I would not be using that as just like, hey, do you want 10% off? I want to go, are we in agreement? Is this what you want? Because if this is what you want, we can get where you need to be. But if this is what you want, how do we go forward?
Yeah, because I used to sell real estate in Thailand, and that was a big thing. Like that, it came up, and I knew the other developers are doing it, and so when I was closing the deals, it was always like, this is what I used to do. This is probably the most dishonest thing I've done in sales. Well, it is, but I don't. In B2B, I'm pretty sure that I don't do anything dishonest, but I definitely did this in real estate. So I would say. They'd say ask for the furniture package, and I say, look, I don't think you're getting the furniture package, but if I can get you 50% off the furniture package, like I'm gonna have to make a phone call, but if I get, will you sign, right? And I'd go off, and I knew I could give away half the furniture package, but so I wouldn't call anyone. I just be like nodding for a while, keep them waiting.
Yeah.
Sometimes I call someone and say, I just wanted to include you in this. I got to buy away, because I knew I could do it.
And how great I am. Yeah.
But B2B, this is what I've always thought is because everyone says in B2B, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's anyone out there that says I'm second best or third best, I haven't come across them before. Everyone says they're the best. So buyers are like tuned out to people saying that they're the best. But as soon as you say I'm the best, and then you're like, okay, yes, I'll drop my price below that competitor. It's like a mixed message, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Because some people being cheaper doesn't always mean, well, it doesn't mean better. We know that. But being cheaper doesn't always mean that we're going to go ahead with it. Because actually we want somebody that's going to solve our problems, that's going to deliver on what they've promised, and is going to give us a good experience. And if we can get all of that and it's more expensive than somebody else, then we're going to buy it because we're invested, we've built that relationship, we trust them that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Whereas if we just go in and go, cool, I mean, there's price matching, and that comes in a different element depending on what product or service that you're selling. There's price matching available. But again, that's a slippery slope, because once we get into that realm, then it's just trying to find something cheaper. I mean, like, I've done it. I go to Officeworks, I would Google, like, can I find something cheaper? Because they match it and beat it by 5%. So why on earth wouldn't I? I go in there and I go, I found this product. So you guys sell it, can I have 5% off? I'm going to do it every single time. Whereas if that's not there, I'm just going to go into Officeworks and buy it because it's more convenient than waiting for an order online or going somewhere else. So Officeworks actually doesn't need that, because it's not, unless they've got, Staples next door. I don't know whether that's in Australia anymore, but if they've got those two next door, then fair enough, you might want to do it to beat Staples. But a lot of the Officeworks products you can't get in the shops like we can, with others. So actually, the same thing with Apple. Like, we go and buy Apple from Apple because we want the Apple experience. We want to get the Apple bag. We don't want a JB Hi-Fi bag with our Apple products in. So a lot of us are incentivized to go. Sorry for JB Hi-Fi. That we're incentivized to go into Apple to get that experience. We want that. We want that whole journey through and to be explained about certain things, and not just be, thrown something kind of across the counter because we picked it up on the side. So again, there's value in that. And that's really where that value comes from. But just to mention with what you said, that's not dishonest. And I don't believe in the sales realm, is that what you're doing is you're showing value to a customer, and you're giving them, so you can give them 50% off. Now you could go back and say, look, I could probably maybe get you 40% off this, and then you could always go a bit further. So a lot of sales floors will have like an element of discount available, and that's always good as long as it's given to the salesperson they've got autonomy around. So a lot of sales floors
they know how to do that as well. Like, you don't want to just go, and I'll give you this, and it loses
value. We want to be like, is this what you want? Because if you want, I'll ask for that. And I'll go away. But a lot of the time, they already know whether we can do it. Especially, if we're pitching our products and service, I know what I'm prepared to change on. But actually, I don't offer discounts. I don't have that element to go through, because for me, I'm driven on value and looking at like what I can deliver. And if that changes, then my prices have got to change. But right now, for where I'm at and what I'm delivering, customers are paying it because the return on investment is crazy high. So, if you're going to buy on that, you're not going to buy because whether or not I'm going to give you $50 off. That's not an incentive to something.
It's interesting. Like, the clients that I've had that are most experienced in business, they don't want a discount because they don't want to move down your priority list. Like, they want to be at the top of your priority list. It's worth it to them.
And if somebody does ask you for a discount, again, if you've got a component and you don't want a discount, take something out, but go back to your qualification.
Yeah, absolutely.
And say, look, I'm going to take this out. Now, just so you know, this will affect the outcome. So this will mean you won't get this, which you told me is really important. So that's the only way we can get it under that price. And then it's up to them if they're prepared to sacrifice. The chances are they're not, and they'll end up paying.
Yeah. All right, we've got a question.
Yes.
Matthew's late better late than never. Yeah. Thanks for coming, Matthew. Appreciate it, mate. Always. Like we get a lot of guys on Monday Night Live there. You know, you've tuned in before. Got a lot of regulars. Okay, so let's have a look what this says. How do you pre-qualify a person's budget before heading into that first call? Okay, that's a good question. And how do you know you will not be wasting your time in that consultation? Refining the funnel beforehand to attract higher qualified leads. There's a lot of good stuff there.
This is a solid questions. Thanks, Amber.
Yeah. Thanks, okay. Amber, for asking the difficult questions.
Yeah, I'm going to need a wine after this one. Okay, Amber. So, how do you pre-qualify a person's budget before heading into that first call? It depends on if you want to. So, generally, for me, what I would suggest, Amber, can you? I don't know what industry you're in, but if you want to pop industry, I can maybe make it a bit more specific.
Marketing. Yeah. Amber's in marketing. Yeah.
Okay, marketing consultant.
Consultant, yeah, consultant, yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool.
I believe so.
So, if you're pre-qualifying a person's budget before heading into that first call, it depends on what's important to you. So, if you've got a high volume of leads and you only want to speak to the ones that qualify, you can invite them into like two things. You can send them an email and ask them a couple of questions over email before they set up the call. Or you can send them like an Airtable or almost like a survey format through Google or something like that, where you could say, awesome, would love to find out a bit more about you. Please complete this qualification questionnaire or this information gathering or whatever you want to call it prior to our call, and we'll schedule a call in for this time. And within that, you could have some preset questions which will help you when it comes into having that further conversation. However, if we're happy and we want to speak to everybody, then the qualification will come as part of that conversation, not necessarily pre-conversation. So does that make sense?
It does. It does, absolutely. I've seen this done really well where they'll ask for you to scale your budget, and that kind of gives them an idea. One other thing, Amber, you could do is because I get a lot of people that want to have calls that aren't going to buy, and so I just limit that first call to 15 minutes. It's very clear that it's 15 minutes, and so like when quite often I'll be like, okay, I've got to get another call now. Takes me time when I know that they're not qualified, and so people will get off that call and they'll say, well, you didn't try to sell to me, But
yes, and it almost makes them want it more, and that's the really interesting thing. As soon as you say no, they're like, why can't I have that? I want to be involved.
And of course, I could go longer if they are qualified. Like I can set another appointment, but it just sets that expectation up front that you haven't got all the time in the world. You're going to give them a couple of bits of value and ask them some questions, and if it makes sense for both of you to continue conversation.
And that's big in the coaching. That's big in the coaching world as well at the moment, is that like discovery clarity call. So they're like a 15-minute call, and then the following call then is like in more detail because we've understood that this is what you want. So I think from that, you've got your questionnaire, like table, let's find a bit more information, or a pre-qualification call that's much shorter, and then we can go into more detail. But generally your qualification, if you're doing a call, you only really want to set 15 to 20 minutes anyway. And if you're doing a meeting face-to-face, you want to make sure that they're the right leads for you. But again, if you haven't got that many leads, then you might want to see all of them to start understanding how do you actually qualify those leads as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an illusion with a lot of businesses that more time is more value, and I've found that to be the opposite. Like if you offer an hour-long a free strategy session versus somebody who offers like a 15-minute one, I found that the 15-minute one is perceived as more valuable.
Because you've only got 15 minutes. That's all I'm available for. This is expensive, so you've got 15 minutes, and we'll work it out from there. For sure.
You're not going to waste their time. I mean, you shouldn't need an hour to. Yeah.
No,
well,
certainly not.
So,
how do you? She's got more questions on here. How do you know? How do you know they will not be wasting your time in that consultant? To that answered, refining the funnel beforehand to attract higher qualifying leads, or do you ask them pre-qualifying? Yes, okay. So refining the funnel beforehand to attract higher qualifying leads, I think will come into your element of like where your leads are coming from and how they're being qualified, and then having that questionnaire or call would again answer the question. Yeah, and if you're not getting a lot of leads, like I think that was a really good point, Harriet, where there's probably something you can learn from each of those calls. So it's probably a good idea to have more of them, I would imagine.
Do you get involved in helping clients with their lead generation or prospecting?
Yeah, so generally through lead generation will depend. So I'll usually work with somebody in marketing to look at that, because the marketing and sales, that yin and yang of, marketing bringing those leads in, sales converting those leads into selling and paying customers. So generally, if it's about lead generation from a marketing perspective, that's a marketing requirement. But from a lead generation, I focus on lead generation where we generate them outbound, and so that would be outbound calls, outbound emails, LinkedIn messaging, and all of that realm, because a lot of the time we're so focused on marketing, we're focused on social media and getting posts and getting likes and all of that, but actually we can bring the leads in through social media, we can bring the leads in through so many different marketing avenues, but it's how do we convert them, and what happens if that goes away? What happens if all of a sudden your account's gone, or what happens if something gets hacked and you've lost everything? How do you actually generate more leads without spending more money? You go out there and you look for them. And so that's the biggest space for me in supporting businesses in outbound lead generation, because again, we're so programmed for this, like cold calls rubbish, it doesn't work. Cold calling does work, and if it's done in the right way. And I'm not talking about like banging through these leads and getting through to people, but actually finding out who you want to work with and contact them directly with a compelling business reason that they should speak to you or want to work with you.
I go to this a lot, like with new businesses. They're like, I need a website, or I need business cards, or I'm going to start when my Instagram's got 100 followers, and like what I say to them, and this is just I've got a background in sales, but like I also started my business with no money, so I didn't have a website or business cards, but I said to them, you don't need a website, you don't need social media. What you need is some customers. Then you've got a business, right? And the quickest way is to just get in touch with them directly. Like pick up the telephone, call them.
Exactly. And if you've got, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, like, there was a lot of I think a lot of the fear comes from thinking that they have to know everything. So it's like, like they're kind of scared to call because they feel underqualified. Is that imposter syndrome? It probably is. Yeah. But like when I was calling at the start of my business, like I wasn't, and this is just, I think this came naturally to me. I'm not sure if I learned this or not. I can't remember, but it was very much inquisitive. It was like, I've put this thing together for the real estate industry. I don't know if it's good or not. You're in the real estate industry. Can I get some of your feedback on it? Right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're in a conversation and the pressure's off, and then they're like, oh, that's really good. And then they're like, well, you could become my first client,
Yeah. Sure. But it's finding something. So exactly in that scenario where you've got something that is going to support a certain industry, trial it out with those. But also then sharing, we talked before about sharing stories, is about then go out there. Like, so for me, the way I would always structure it with when I'm supporting a client is that I'll look at, okay, if you've done really well in solving a specific problem or coming out with a certain answer, we want to then give them that, we want to solve that problem for more and more people. And if I give the example of if you work in education or if you've worked with somebody in education, you've sold them a product or service and they're in education, why not talk to everyone else in education and tell them about the problem they came to you with, how you solved it, the outcome you were able to generate, and how you potentially could help them, and ask them for a meeting, ask them to catch up. Say, look, I've got this awesome idea, or I've got this awesome product or service that's worked for other people in your industry. I'd love to share their success story. Have you got 10 minutes for a coffee? You're going to get that over and above just marketing, because again, we can market. If we then know that, we can direct our marketing to industry and we can say, let's market to education. But if we don't know to do that, we've got to look at these industry streams, and I just call them verticals.
Absolutely.
And I'll look at each of those verticals and figure out what's going to work and what isn't.
Yeah. People think I sell LinkedIn. Like like what you just talked about is what I sell. Like it's nothing to do with LinkedIn. It's about contacting somebody who's in an industry and exactly that. Like, well, quite often we'll do like, if they've got a client that's doing really well in Melbourne, right? In a certain industry. Well, we go to Sydney and we're like, we've got this client in Melbourne that's doing really well. Same industry as you. Works there. What sure. Do you think it will work here too?
You want to go? Yeah.
You know, but like the value is not in the platform. Like you could do the same thing on a telephone call. It's what we're saying to them and what we're asking them. That's where the value is, because a lot of people do LinkedIn messages and like, you know, it's just spammy. It's all about
Yeah, exactly. And it's using the right type of messaging for LinkedIn. And I'm LinkedIn fan. Like I'm not a social media fan. I'm a LinkedIn fan, because that's how I grew that's how I've grown every single business I've worked with, but also how I've grown my sales pipeline. Like when I was a salesperson in doing this job day in, day out in IT, and I moved to Perth with no contact, absolutely no contact. I didn't know a single person in business, let alone in Perth. And I came in and I started working, and I built up one business, and then I went into another in the state. And that was all done through LinkedIn. It was all done through outbound. We had no marketing strategy. We had a very average logo. We changed the logo, which was great. But again, it was not about that. It wasn't about marketing. It was about getting out there and finding people that we knew we could help and giving them a story around that. And that was all through LinkedIn, and outbound referrals and those networking was not driven through marketing or through social media. And you were saying at the start of your career, like, I just want to close off on this, like we'll finish off on this, like, because this is, as you're talking, I'm thinking of like all of the mistakes that I've seen being made, what the things people will relate to. And one of the things is, you know, you said at the start that you didn't want to be a salesperson and you like call yourself something else. And now you're like, you can reach out to somebody that you don't know and you can set an appointment and take the conversation offline. You know, for somebody that is procrastinating a lot, like, because like social media is a great example. Like, it's a great way to procrastinate. It's like, well, you know, I'm going to focus on doing this post instead, so I don't have to call that person, right? Yeah. You know, Is it just competence that builds that confidence, like knowing that, you know, you've got the skills and getting the training to build that confidence, or is it something more psychological, do you think? I turned that into a closed question, didn't I? I was about to say, boss, I'm not going to do that being live and be like, that's not, you said that. But that's a prime example. I think so. For me, I would say mindset number one. If I sat there every day and going, and for me, it was like sales is bad, sales is sleazy, sales is it's about built on lies. It's all about targets. It's not about actually whether I can help somebody. So for me, that was my mindset, and I was able to turn that around when I could start to see actually I could help people, and through the products or services and the connections I had, I could help so many more people if I could actually reach them, and that's where the sales comes in. But it's building the confidence, but usually confidence comes around knowing what it is that you sell. So if you can articulate what you sell, then you'll be more confident to pick up the phone, write that email, check in on somebody, than you will be if you're like, I actually don't know what my pitch is. I don't know what my elevator pitch is. I don't know what my dinner party pitch is. And there's all these different ways that we can talk about what we do and how we do it. But if we're not confident, that it's really difficult to go out and put ourselves out there, because we're like, oh, what if they ask me this question? I don't really know what that sounds like. So I'm going to say mindset, the ability to articulate what it is that you offer, and then having then a really clear, defined process and stories around how you can help somebody. So what's that journey we take them on, and how we help somebody actually bring that into fruition.
Yeah, cool. So it sounds like you're a believer in scripts to some extent, you have like.
To begin with, so usually if somebody's new to sales or new to if we're changing a process in a business, then usually I'll use a script, and the script will be there as an example. Because again, if I look at business owners trying to sell their products and services, not salespeople that are used to this, but business owners, I'll give them scripts and I'll give them templates, and it will be there for them to use and tweak. Because again, until we're confident, we don't want to get on a call and go, I'm not really too sure what I was going to say. But having a script ensures that we flow through everything. And then once we practice makes perfect. And then we can then start to go off piste and talk about something that's not necessarily on that script, because we want it to be conversational. We want it to be fluid. We want to build relationships. And we do that when we start to be able to listen, as opposed to worrying what we're going to say next. And that's where the script really comes in. But for me, scripts after that, I don't really want a script. Scripts work really well in call centers, where it's like we have to be compliant and we have to hit this. But generally, the script comes as part of a training and a learning exercise to give us the confidence to get on the phone, answer the phone, make those calls, have those conversations. And then we then move on. It's a bit like when we were younger, you used to like ring the bank and you have to like say something. I remember it well. That's what I did. I used to write it all down, know what I wanted to say, and then I could say it on the phone. But if I went into the conversation, I wouldn't know.
I have like I have a I don't know if you call it script, but I have like an agenda, and it has like it's got the different stages of identifying the problem, identifying the outcome, and how to measure it, and so the process. But then there's like 2 to 3 questions under each heading that I have there, and I do better if I have it in front of me, even though I'm not like so experienced, because I'll just go, shit, didn't ask them that, you know.
Okay. So for you that works. So I'm working with an IT company and that I've been working with for quite a while, but I've created, we've got a table, and in that table's got each product and service component, and underneath that got questions. So when they first go out to meetings, they've got like a template that sticks in the back of their notebook, or they can pull it up on their laptop screen, and they've got something to reference, like, okay, did I ask that? But the more meetings they go on, the less questions they have to look at, because they know they've got to identify that. And so it's getting into the mind frame that you do not leave that meeting without finding out, like, what's your top 3 key, what's your top 3 agenda, or like what's your top 3 things you can find out from that meeting. Have them written down before you go in, and you don't need that anymore, because by the end, I mean, like, we sold I think 40 different products, but I could go in and I know everything because I did it so often, day in, day out, and also I knew it worked. And so if I didn't ask those questions, I didn't get to the sale as easily as I could have done if I just asked the right questions. So it becomes part of a process, and that process becomes really important when we know that it A, works, and that B, consistency of sales is important to our business and to our pipeline for a salesperson.
Yeah, and I found like because I was very nervous about having the script in front of me, especially if I was meeting with them first face to face, right? Like. But when you get your head around how it's valuable for the client, you know, like, because I would look at the script, I would pull out the script at the end of the meeting, and they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Well, I prepared some questions because I just want to make sure I get all the information I need." You know, I forgot to ask this one. And it actually worked well, but rather than, you know, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I've got like these questions here, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you can always refer back and be like, can I just double check and just make sure I've covered everything? So people are okay with that. People are okay with making notes. People are okay with, if you don't know the answer to something, tell them, you like, say, can I come back to you on that? Let me just double check. I don't want to tell you something that I'm not 100% on.
They'll know if you're bullshitting.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
They will call bullshit if you're lying or making it up.
I've spotted that a mile away. Well, Amber's come back. Yes, thank you so much for the answer, Harry. I really appreciate it. Currently doing the discovery call, but start to pre-qualify. These are not always my ideal fish. Yeah, that's one of the things that we come across, but
to really benefit from the skills. And exactly right, Amber. Like, you don't want to be wasting your time with somebody or giving lots of time to somebody that isn't necessarily your ideal client. And so that pre-qualification for 20 minutes of work, maybe even shorten it. You know, if you really want to get deep into that, you know, requirements, or trial it, like send out the survey to half of them and do the call with half of them and see what works. It's all about data. Data is king in sales, because we get to see what works, what doesn't, what brings us more leads, what doesn't, what converts more leads, what doesn't, what happened in January that didn't happen in February. That's really where we start to nut out what works for us as a business and as a salesperson versus what doesn't.
Yeah. And Amber knows this, but like I've found that with the niching thing and finding and dealing with the ideal client, because I've spent a lot of years like I'd have all these clients and I'd be like, but they're not my ideal client, but they're my client, right? So having an ideal client, in my experience, it started with saying no to a lot of people. Like, it was saying no to clients that weren't right, and it was really, really uncomfortable because I was like, "That's
Really
business,"
hard.
But then you pitch, you everything starts to change because you're only dealing with this, and then you speak in their language rather than, "Oh, this is my ideal client. I've got to change everything I'm saying." It's like,
Exactly, it's so true. And there's a book. One of my favorite books is called Essentialism, and there was actually a
Okay.
podcast with Greg McKeown, who's the author of Essentialism, and he said many people have the curse of capability. I thought it's so interesting that you call it the curse because you can do so much. And so what that means then is that we're not niching, we're not saying no, we're just being like, I can do that. Yeah, I can. Can you do this? Yeah, I can do that. But is it either takes away from our niche product or service that we want to offer, and we get really distracted about the shiny things that make money, and we go, actually, I just want to do this. I just want it because this is what I'm really good at. And it's the same. If I started offering a marketing service, well, should I be offering a marketing service, or should I outsource to a marketing service? Because actually, yeah, it would go hand in hand, but that's not my niche. So I could help you with marketing, but that's not what I want to be doing. And it goes the same for what we want to offer versus what clients we want to work with. And actually, we're capable of supporting so many clients from so many different areas and industries and walks of life. But actually, do we want to work with them? Are they our ideal client? Are they going to work with us in a way that we want to be worked with? And are we going to be able to support them? And will they work to the parameters that you're setting? Or is it going to be a disaster? Or is it not going to yield the right results? Because that, again, impacts you and your brand and your reputation.
Yeah. And scaling a business is like, if you're scaling a business, like it helps to, niche down from productizing everything and systemizing everything. But I found it also helps, like, even if you don't want to scale with people, it just allows you to be better at what you do. You make less mistakes. You listen more because you're not thinking about, what the next step in the process is. So in my experience, it's been one of the hardest things to do, but it's been one of the best. Like very hard because I came from a background of digital marketing, strategies for AdWords, SEO, websites. You see all these clients making all these mistakes, and they're like, "Can you help me with my Facebook ads?" And I'm like, "Nah."
I could, but no, that's not what. And it's so powerful. Like, Matthew's just commented here about he turned down an 80K plus deal due to it not sitting right. And knowing the time required, all of that would have been better spent on other more realistic clients, which is perfect. But the biggest year I ever had in sales was because I said no. And every year, the beginning of every year, I had a word, and that was my word for the year. And one of the years, my word was no. And that's when I scaled. That was like when it just changed the game, because I was like, no, not right for me. I'm not right for you. You're not right for me. Let's move on. Let's work with somebody else. So old me would have just done it and likely regretted it down the track. Exactly. But we all learn from that.
A lot of mentors have said that to me. Like I've walked in and I've been really excited, and I'm like, I got this massive deal. It's and they're like, maybe you should just skip this one. Because that's what the experience tells them. It's been one of the things that I've actually found that a lot of business owners that have scaled to, like, I guess I want to say like to like 10 million up, when they scale to 10 million up, like they just kind of at some point learn that lesson that, you got to know when to walk away. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And once you get, when you get to that realm, like that's really where it works, because otherwise you start dealing with stuff that's distracting you, that's costing you more money, that's taking away from the clients that really need your help and really want to work with you. And that's certainly where that scalability comes in, for sure.
Yeah. And it'll come back to you, like because they may not they may not think it's as awesome as you think it'll be, because you're not prepared, it's, what I mean, it's outside your anyway. Yeah, we digress. We've gone over time. You've done, Harriet. This is good. So
much. I could talk about sales all night. We could just keep going for like 3 hours, and then we'd cover it all.
Sell me this pen. I didn't even get to that.
Sell me this pen. Street.
It's good to see some of the comments coming through. Yeah, I want to get Jordan Belfort on here soon, because he's
so good.
Is he? I don't agree with everything he says on LinkedIn. I've fired up at him in some of the comments.
Okay. I don't know if I connect with him. I follow him on LinkedIn. But his method, like a lot of, I'd say Wolf of Wall Street is one of my favorite films ever.
Is it?
Like
There's a lot of drugs and sex in it, Harriet. It's a bit naughty.
So good. It's the sales. It's the bit when he's like on the phone, he's doing the script, and they all just talk, turning around, looking at him. I'm like, yes, that's sales. That's it. I mean, it's not ethical. Don't get me wrong. But it's just the way that he is able to, to get them on that call and to really sell into that dream. That's what we're doing, but ethically. We're doing it authentically. We're doing it ethically because, again, we want people to keep coming back for more, and we don't want to get to
Yeah. It's a different world these days, isn't it? With everyone, your reputation's everything.
Yes.
Thanks so much for being so engaged in the comments, Amber and Matthew. Always ask great questions. Oh, look who it is! It's the one and only Michelle Bibby, the matriarch. Hello, welcome. Thanks you so much for your time, Harriet. That was awesome. Really valuable.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Okay, well, that's a wrap, guys. We've got over time. Thank you so much. And have a killer week of business. Go out there and make some sales.
Good luck, everybody.